Picture this, a small metal sphere, no bigger than a beach ball, circling our planet every 96 minutes. Its simple beeping sound could be heard by anyone with a radio, yet it struck terror into the hearts of millions of Americans. This was Sputnik, and its launch on October 4th, 1957, didn't just mark the beginning of the space age. It ignited the most ambitious technological race in human history. What followed was 12 years of unprecedented innovation, fierce competition, and extraordinary human courage that would culminate in one of mankind's greatest achievements. But the story of how America went from being humiliated by a Soviet satellite to landing astronauts on the moon is far more complex and fascinating than most people realize. The roots of this incredible journey stretch back to the ashes of World War II, where former enemies became unlikely allies in the pursuit of reaching the stars. German rocket engineer Wernher von Braun, who had developed Hitler's V-2 missiles, found himself working for the American military alongside thousands of other German scientists brought to the United States through Operation Paperclip. These weren't just any scientists. They possessed knowledge that would prove invaluable in the coming decades. Von Braun's team understood rocket propulsion, guidance systems, and the fundamental challenges of launching objects into space better than anyone else on Earth. Their expertise would become the foundation upon which America's space program was built. However, in the immediate aftermath of the war, space exploration wasn't the priority. The world had entered a new kind of conflict, the Cold War. The United States and Soviet Union were locked in an ideological struggle that would define the second half of the 20th century. Both superpowers recognized that future wars would be won through technological superiority, and rockets capable of delivering nuclear warheads across continents became the ultimate weapon. This military focus meant that early rocket development concentrated on creating intercontinental ballistic missiles rather than peaceful space exploration. The same technology that could send a nuclear bomb to Moscow could also launch a satellite into orbit. It was a sobering reality that military necessity would drive the innovations that eventually took humans to the moon. When Sputnik pierced the darkness of that October night in 1957, it shattered American confidence. Here was proof that the Soviet Union possessed rockets powerful enough to reach space, which meant they could also reach American cities. The psychological impact was devastating. Americans looked up at the night sky and saw a communist satellite passing overhead every hour and a half, a constant reminder of their technological inferiority. The American response was swift, but initially disastrous. Just 2 months after Sputnik, the United States attempted to launch its own satellite using the Vanguard rocket. The entire world watched as the rocket rose a few feet off the launch pad before exploding in a spectacular fireball. The press dubbed it Kaputnik and Flopnik. American prestige had never been lower. It was at this moment of national humiliation that Wernher von Braun and his team were finally given permission to attempt their own satellite launch. Working around the clock, they modified their military Jupiter C rocket to carry a small scientific payload called Explorer 1. On January 31st, 1958, just 4 months after Sputnik, America finally had its own satellite orbiting Earth. Explorer 1 did more than restore American pride. Its instruments discovered the Van Allen radiation belts surrounding our planet, marking the first major scientific discovery of the space age. But more importantly, it proved that America could compete in this new frontier. The success of Explorer 1 led directly to the creation of NASA in July 1958. This new civilian agency would coordinate America's space efforts and transform them from a military program into a scientific and exploratory mission. The stage was now set for an even bolder challenge that would push human ingenuity to its absolute limits. The space race had officially begun, and both superpowers were preparing for achievements that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. The Soviets weren't content to rest on their laurels. On April 12, 1961, they delivered another crushing blow to American morale when cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human being to orbit Earth. For 108 minutes, this 27-year-old pilot circled our planet, radioing back observations and proving that humans could survive in the hostile environment of space. Gagarin's flight sent shockwaves through America. The Soviets had not only beaten them to space with satellites, they had now put a man in orbit, while America had barely managed to launch a few small payloads. The technological gap seemed insurmountable, and the implications were terrifying. If the Soviet Union could put a man in space, what else could they accomplish? President John F. Kennedy faced an impossible situation. The nation that had pioneered flight, built the atomic bomb, and led the Industrial Revolution was falling behind in the most important technological competition of the modern era. Something dramatic had to be done to restore American leadership and demonstrate the superiority of the free world. Just 3 weeks after Gagarin's historic flight, America finally put its first astronaut into space. Alan Shepard's 15-minute suborbital hop aboard Freedom 7 was a modest achievement compared to the Soviet orbital flight, but it proved that American astronauts were ready to take on the challenge. The mission went flawlessly, with Shepard demonstrating that humans could control a spacecraft manually when needed. But Kennedy knew that matching Soviet achievements wasn't enough. America needed to leap ahead with a goal so ambitious, so technically challenging, that it would showcase American technological superiority once and for all. On May 25, 1961, just 20 days after Shepard's flight, Kennedy addressed Congress with a proposal that stunned the world. The young president announced that America would land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the end of the decade. It was an audacious goal that many considered impossible. At the time, America had exactly 15 minutes of human spaceflight experience. The technology to reach the moon didn't exist. The rockets weren't powerful enough. The spacecraft weren't designed, and the procedures weren't developed. Yet Kennedy's lunar challenge captured the imagination of an entire generation. This wasn't just about beating the Soviets anymore. It was about pushing the boundaries of human capability and exploring a new world that had captivated humanity since the dawn of civilization. The moon landing became a symbol of what free societies could accomplish when they committed their full resources and creativity to a common goal. The scale of the undertaking was staggering. NASA's budget would increase by over 500% in just 4 years. At its peak, the Apollo program employed more than 400,000 people and consumed over 4% of the federal budget. Universities, corporations, and government agencies across the country united behind this singular mission. The challenges seemed endless. Engineers had to design spacecraft that could survive the vacuum of space, protect astronauts from deadly radiation, and function reliably across the 240,000-mile journey to the moon. They needed to develop life support systems, navigation computers, and communication equipment that had never been built before. Perhaps most daunting of all was the rocket itself. Getting to the moon required a launch vehicle more powerful than anything ever constructed. The Saturn V would eventually stand 363 feet tall and weigh over 6 million pounds when fully fueled. Its 5 first-stage engines would produce 7.5 million pounds of thrust, making it the most powerful machine ever successfully operated by humans. But before astronauts could attempt the lunar journey, they needed to master the basic skills of spaceflight. The Mercury program had proven that humans could survive in space for short periods. Now the Gemini program would teach them how to maneuver, dock with other spacecraft, and work outside their capsules during spacewalks. Spacewalks. Looking back at that journey from Sputnik to the Sea of Tranquility, we witnessed something truly extraordinary. What began as national humiliation transformed into humanity's greatest adventure. A simple beeping satellite sparked a technological revolution that would redefine what seemed possible. The Apollo program wasn't just about beating the Soviets or planting an American flag on another world. It represented the pinnacle of human ingenuity, determination, and cooperation. Hundreds of thousands of engineers, scientists, technicians, and support staff worked together to solve problems that had never been solved before. They turned science fiction into reality. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepped onto the lunar surface on July 20th, 1969, they carried with them the dreams and aspirations of an entire species. For one brief moment, humanity looked beyond Earth and saw what we could accomplish when we dared to reach for the impossible. The technologies developed during those 12 remarkable years didn't just get us to the moon. They revolutionized computing, materials science, telecommunications, and countless other fields that shape our daily lives today. The Apollo program proved that when we commit ourselves to grand challenges, we don't just achieve our goals, we transform ourselves in the process. That legacy continues to inspire us as we set our sights on Mars and beyond, reminding us that the only limits to human achievement are the ones we accept.